good to have you back at Mr. Horror Global. Tonight's story comes from a monk I know, about the afternoons he spent as a young student walking out to a country pet shop to play with the dogs, never knowing what waited there for him. Viewer discretion advised. 4 cans of coffee. You ever hear a story where somebody walks straight through something terrible and never even knows it happened? Not while it's happening, not until years later when someone else finally tells them. This is one of those. I heard it from a monk. He's an older man now, but this happened to him back when he was still a student, studying to take his vows. He was at a university out in the countryside, in the Buddhist studies program, and he lived in a dormitory set aside for the students on that path. Quiet place, the middle of nowhere. There was nothing to do out there. No arcades, no shops, nothing for a young man to blow off a little steam with. But if you walked a few miles down the road, there was a small pet shop run by a man I'll just call Frank. And Frank kept big dogs, the friendly kind, the kind you can wrestle around with on the floor. So the monk and a friend of his used to make that walk just to play with the dogs, take pictures, get out of their own heads for an afternoon. One day they were out there snapping photos, having a good time, and all of a sudden Frank came storming out of the back of the shop, furious. Who told you you could take pictures in here? And then, harder, leaning in close, you didn't photograph any people, did you? The monk apologized and figured they'd just leave quickly before this got any worse. But the second he started backing toward the door, Frank's whole face changed, just like that. The anger drained right out of him, and he turned almost friendly. He asked the monk where he was from, and when the monk told him, Frank lit up, because it turned out they were from the same place, same region, same accent. Suddenly they were old friends. And when Frank heard that this kid was studying Buddhism at the university up the road, he made him an offer. Tell you what, why don't you come help me out around the shop, twice a week, 15 minutes each time, just walk the dogs, and afterward you sit with me a while and we talk, in our home accent, you and me, that's all I want. And for that, 15 minutes of dog walking, twice a week, and a little conversation, he said he'd pay $1,500 a month. It was an absurd amount of money for the work. The monk wanted to say yes on the spot, but his friend was standing right there, and the friend didn't like it at all. Said it was strange, too good to be real, so the monk held off, told Frank he'd have to ask his dormitory supervisor first, and then he'd decide. Frank said, sure, no problem, and then he disappeared into the back and came out with a few cans of coffee, set them down, and told the monk to pick whichever one he liked. So the monk chose one and drank it. The friend was offered one too, but the friend turned it down, and that was that. They walked back to the dorm. When the monk asked his supervisor about the job, the man was not happy. He laid into him. What kind of student in training can't let go of his own greed? A young man on this path, chasing after easy money like that. The monk got a real scolding for it. So a few days later, he walked back out to the pet shop to turn the job down. Frank took it well enough, said all right, no hard feelings, and then, same as before, he went into the back and brought out a few cans of coffee and had the monk pick one. The monk chose one, drank it, and headed home. After that, he got busy, and there was no real reason to make that walk anymore. But then things changed for him. He was leaving, moving to the city to continue his studies, and before he left, he figured he owed Frank a goodbye, so he made the walk one last time. Frank was genuinely sad to hear he was going, kept saying this was the last time they'd ever see each other. And then, of course, he went into the back and came out with a few cans of coffee and had the monk choose one. The monk picked one and drank it right there. And then Frank asked him something out of nowhere. "You're training to be a monk, so tell me, is there really a God? Is there really a Buddha?" And the monk said simply that yes, he believed there was, that his belief was the whole reason he did the work he did. Frank sat with that for a moment. Then he reached out with one more can. "Here, drink one more." And the monk said no thank you. He'd had enough, and he said his goodbyes and left. That was the last time the two of them ever saw each other. 3 years went by. The monk was living in the city now, and one day he got a phone call from his old dormitory supervisor, and the supervisor said, "That pet shop owner, that man you used to visit, he's been arrested. He's a serial killer." It turned out Frank was the man behind a string of murders that had been all over the news, the kind of case that grips a whole country for months. And one of the things that came out about him, one of his own rules, the way he chose, was this: he killed greedy people, people who reached for too much. The monk hung up that phone with his skin crawling, but that wasn't the end of it, because later he read something in the papers that put the whole thing together. While Frank was in jail awaiting trial, a reporter was interviewing him, and out of nowhere the killer said that he thought maybe there really was a God after all, a Buddha. The reporter asked him what on earth he meant. And Frank told him, "Years ago, back when I had that pet shop, I killed someone, and right after, a young monk came walking into my shop, so I gave him coffee, 4 cans. 3 of them I'd put poison in, only 1 was clean." He said, "That monk came to me 3 separate times, and every single time, out of those 4 cans, he reached out and took the one that wasn't poisoned. 3 for 3. And that last time when he'd already chosen the safe one, I held out another and told him to drink 1 more, and that one was poisoned too, and he turned it down. He just turned it down." And the killer said, "Isn't that something? Don't you think there really might be a God? Because that boy, somebody was watching over him. Something reached down and stood between us. There's no other way to explain it." The monk never knew, not while any of it was happening. He thought he was walking out to play with some dogs and earn a little spending money. He thought the worst thing in that shop was a bad-tempered owner who'd yelled at him over a few photographs. He drank that man's coffee 3 times and walked away 3 times, and the only reason he's alive today to tell it is the very thing he gave the killer when he was asked, that he believed. And here's the part that stays with me. A man who killed without blinking, a man who chose his victims by their greed, looked at that boy walking out of his shop alive and unharmed 3 times over, and the one explanation he could find, the thing that finally made even him believe, was that there was a God, and the God had been standing in the room the whole time.